Jets are 2-2. Saleh says his thing about cadence. Rodgers doesn't love that. He speaks out about that. They're going to London. They got his game against the Vikings. It's like it's never too soon for a must win.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman. We are officially in that magical time of year where the season is young, not that young, and the trade deadline is still a month off. It's speculation season. It's Photoshop season. Photoshopping players into your team's favorite uniform all over the league. Everybody who might be the slightest bit disgruntled is linked somewhere. Feels like the theme for our week 5 preview. Fantastic week for y'all. So many big matchups to get to. We're going to preview all the biggest ones, highlighted by Dak Prescott returning to Pittsburgh, the scene of where he really became the Cowboys starting quarterback. I talked about this earlier today. It's wild to think it was 8 years ago. Tony Romo gets hurt in the preseason of Dak Prescott's rookie year. He takes the job on an interim basis, and the Cowboys just win and win and win. And it was a trip to Pittsburgh where Dak and the Cowboys downed Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown. I think Le'Veon Bell was still there at the time. Classic game, beat him in a shootout. And shortly after that, Tony Romo had to give a press conference acknowledging that he was not getting the starting job of the Cowboys back. And now Dak Prescott is the most beleaguered quarterback in the NFL, the guy who can't win the big game. It's amazing how cyclical everything is in this beautiful league. I'm going to talk plenty about that, as well as some of the other big matchups of the week right off the bat here, as we like to do on Thursdays with our guy, Peter Schrager. Stop by for the weekly cheat sheet. Peter and I talked about Dallas, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Houston, big Monday night game this week, the New Orleans Saints going out to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And as I alluded to, plenty of Davante Adams talk thrown in the mix because it is trade season after all. Check out my conversation with Peter Schrager.
All right, Peter, we're having you on to preview some of the biggest matchups of the week as per usual. But before we get into the matchups, we got to talk about the trade sensation that's sweeping the nation. Is there a more predictable major trade saga than Davante Adams potentially leaving Las Vegas this year?
And what the shame of it is, they won a great game on Sunday.
I know, right?
They're 2-2, and I think if you're that toxicity doesn't work, especially if you're a young team with a coach like Antonio Pierce. So I think he's done. He's gone, and you're hearing now he's got his wish list, and he's using his agents to get out the teams that he wants to go to, and people are connecting dots. Well, he worked with Derek Carr, so Saints make sense, and but he loves Aaron Rodgers, so Jets make sense. I look, he's making $900,000 a game this season, and he's leaving as a disgruntled 32-year-old wide receiver. It's not going to be 31 teams pecking at this thing. I think there's going to be a select few, but I do think if it's going to happen, it could happen rather shortly. I don't see this going week to week to week, especially seeing him on the field week to week to week with the Raiders team, with the way he's been speaking out, and how apparently Antonio Pierce, it seems like, has just had enough as well.
I was going to say, this might be the first time I've ever heard of a coach getting involved in like a liking, unliking Instagram sort of thing. That was the word yesterday, that Antonio Pierce maybe liked something on Instagram about Davante being done with the Raiders. Like I said, this just feels like it's been heading in this direction since the summer, honestly, or really maybe even from the time the Raiders decided to part ways with Derek Carr. Like that was a big part of the reason, obviously, that Davante Adams wanted to be there. I'm with you. Like this does feel like something that happens in short order. And that's why, of course, anytime a major player is linked in a trade like this, a team like the Cowboys is going to come up. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be willing to pull the trigger on something like this quickly enough, because it does feel like with the hard feelings, for lack of a better word, in Vegas, I can't see this playing out for another month for teams to sort of decide whether they're buyers or sellers, you know?
I mean, the Cowboys are interesting to watch. They're not usually quick impulse traders and these things, but I go back
Exactly, yeah.
way back when they got Roy Williams. Remember that from Detroit, and they gave two first round picks, and it's like sometimes Jerry's done it, but this is a different Jerry than those days. Cowboys would be interesting. Of course, salary really does matter, and I know everyone says, "Well, salary cap doesn't matter." It does, and he's owed 13.5 million the rest of the season, about a million a week based on what's less, and a lot of teams can't figure out the gymnastics of that salary cap based on dead money and a lot of stuff. So there's only a certain select few. Like the Chiefs, for example, have 5 million now. I don't think the Raiders would ever trade the Chiefs within the division, their star player, to give the Chiefs a chance to have success. I don't think Mark Davis is looking to do that, but that's an example of a team that like couldn't fiscally probably do that.
Right.
Cowboys, they might have some wiggle room if they were to be creative, but like a lot of people early, and what happens is you wake up and there's a report and it comes from like Dove Kleinman or one of these like MJ football, and it's like the commanders are interested, and like I will come on this podcast next week and say I apologize, I was wrong if I am wrong, and I'll eat it and I'll send a bouquet of flowers to Dove Kleinman and the rest of the aggregators and the other people who are reporting without I will do that. I don't see the Commanders making a trade. It's like you've got a good thing going. You got a young quarterback. This is a 32-year-old veteran wide receiver who's disgruntled with his current team. Everything's working right for Washington. I don't know if you bring in Davante Adams at this point in the game and say, all right, we're going for a Super Bowl right now. We're dropping Davante in. Like, yes, is he an upgrade from their current wide receiver 2 and 3? Sure, but things are working in DC right now. I don't know if you upset the apple cart by bringing in another personality after what they've been building all summer long.
I think a lot of the times we oversimplify these things, and it's like what looks good on Twitter, like which Photoshop gets people the most excited on Twitter. But I really do think in this case it's a little bit easier to connect the dots where you're like, all right, who's got salary cap flexibility, a veteran quarterback, a realistic shot of making the playoffs, and right there you can probably come up with 3 to 5 teams. And whenever this happens, I'd be pretty surprised if it doesn't kind of fit those parameters, you know?
Does the Jets okay, so here's a take from the Jets side. He's been talking about Rodgers for years. At the golf tournament this year, they had that weird interaction. Rodgers was talking about how he wants to be teammates with Davante again, but then he took it back. And it's like, that's not what I was saying. I was saying I want to golf with Davante, like whatever. Jets are 2-2. Salah says his thing about cadence. Rodgers doesn't love that. He speaks out about that. They're going to London. They got his game against the Vikings. It's like, it's never too soon for a must win. I mean, never too early. Like if I'm talking October 5th, I'm thinking it's a must win, but like the Jets have to win that game. Like the Jets can't be 2-3 and come back here and solid. Like, do you add Davante Adams to that mix? And then if you do that, are you only furthering the narrative that Aaron Rodgers runs the team? And does that matter? Like, it doesn't matter. Have you already succumbed to that? And it's, yeah, he does. And now he wants this and we're going to get him this piece because it helps. Or do you say, all right, hold up. We don't need to have another one of Rodgers' cronies. We don't need to have another one of Nate Hackett's guys. We've got a good roster. Let's roll with it. Like, these are the questions and conversations that are having internally. And if you're Davante Adams, I don't think you have much of a choice. It's where the Raiders want to send you.
I hope that the Jets don't draw the line at the perennial all-pro receiver who has a great relationship with their quarterback. Like and they've done some things that I didn't always agree with to make Rodgers happy. But in this case, when you know that you're probably losing your job if you don't make a legit playoff run, I say, let's go for it. Like, is this really where we're going to draw the line? Like, no, we do not want Aaron Rodgers'
Yes, you can have Alan
team.
Lazard. Yes, you can have Billy Turner. Yes, you can have Nathaniel Hackett, but no, you can't have Davante Adams. That's a bridge too far. Yeah, no, I hear you.
I don't see it. I did one last thing I just really love, and you mentioned it, and I it makes perfect sense. But like in this day and age, I really love, like, it is more normal to see a division trade. Whether like Philly and Washington just did it for Jahan Dotson earlier this year. TJ Hawkinson was traded from Detroit to Minnesota, so like it is a little bit more normal. But I really love that the Raiders would say, like, absolutely not. Like, Mark Davis is like, my father would never forgive me if I were to do this. And I love that there's still some of that old school pettiness in the NFL.
And the Chiefs are so desperate for this like three-peat. They'd be the first team, and like they're not doing them any favors to go achieve it. I love that too. I think it's cool. It still exists.
Yeah, for sure. Some throwback. All right, let's get to these games. Let's start with a very big early game. The Buffalo Bills go into Houston after that butt whooping they took in Baltimore. The stat that I can't get enough of, I mentioned it on the recap show. This is the first time the Bills lost a game by more than a touchdown in almost 3 years. Like
Hmm.
November 2021 was the last time they lost a game by more than 6 points. I'm really curious to see how they respond to the way that they got punched in the mouth, because it's just not something we've seen a whole lot during the Josh Allen era.
No, in fact, it has been 44 straight games that they had not lost by more than 6 points, which is a weird stat, but it's an NFL record. Like 44 games, they've lost a lot of games, but they were all within 6 points. So this was their first blowout loss, but it came in off the heels of them having an offense that was number one in the league and averaging 37 points per game. And we were like, all right, put to bed any narratives they're going to miss Diggs or miss Gabe Davis. Well, I watched, Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir get out there, and it wasn't the same as it was when they had the full accoutrement of weapons. So no Von Miller now, obviously no Matt Milano, no Diggs, no Gabe Davis. It's like, all right, September, those wins are great, but this league moves too fast. And there were a lot of questions after the way they came out defensively against the Baltimore Ravens. And then we're not able to answer offensively against the Ravens. And to me, Stroud has been playing outstanding this year. There's been no sophomore jinx. There's been no step back. They lost the game to Minnesota, but besides that, he looks great. He's a worthy competitor to Allen in this game, and I wouldn't be shocked if Houston won.
Oh, absolutely not. And on top, clearly CJ Stroud is phenomenal. Can we talk a little bit about the guy that he's throwing the ball to? I know that
This
everybody
kid is amazing. Nico Collins?
I know that everybody knows who he is. And I've brought this up already at least once on the show. Heading into the season, it was like, yeah, Nico Collins is a really good player. The Texans got him extended early, but it was the idea of like that trio of Diggs, Tank, and Nico that got people really excited. Now, I mean, I'm here to tell you, like this dude is on a. We don't need to be thinking of Houston in anything other than like this alpha all pro receiver, and like having Diggs and Tank Dell is nice. Like I don't think people were ready for that, but that's where we are.
No, and I don't have a great memory of him at Michigan being anything. Like I don't. There's no like we.
He's
A lot of,
definitely like he is an all-timer guy where you're like his pro career is going leaps and
right.
bounds beyond his college career.
Like he played in the Big Ten. He played for Harbaugh. He won a lot of games. He was on national TV. He was on Fox Big Noon Kickoff. All those games. I don't remember Nico Collins doing much at Michigan. I actually, if I'm being completely honest, I watch a lot of football. Like I often have to remind myself, where did Nico Collins go to college? Because this guy's unbelievable. He leads the league in receiving yards. He's a huge presence. He has great footwork. He's all these toe tapping catches. And this whole story of this week, like when we did the schedule release in May, was Stephon Diggs is going back to that is like that is not even a story. Like, they have a number one. His name's Nico Collins. It's not Stephon Diggs looking to, maybe that's a fun for like off the field drama, but it's not. Here's Stephon Diggs going to light him up for 200 yards. It's no. How are they going to stop Nico Collins? No one's been able to.
Can I read for you a list of wide receivers that have done better than Nico's 489 yards in their first 4 games in the last like decade or so?
Good. I love this.
Justin Jefferson was on an insane pace last
Okay.
year.
All
Justin
right, love it.
Jefferson and Puka did it. I was a little bit surprised to see Deebo Samuel did this in 2021. And then in 2019, also, Julio Jones had 500 yards after his first 4 weeks.
Julio 2019 with the Falcons?
2019 with the Falcons, he had 500 yards after 4 weeks.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. All right. So yeah, Nico
Three-
Collins, add him to the list. And like
Three of these 4 guys were all pro that year. And Justin Jefferson assuredly would have been all pro if he hadn't wound up getting hurt. That
Yeah.
is,
That's awesome.
it's very strange for me to sit here and say like I think Nico Collins is already an all pro as long as he stays healthy, but that's the trajectory that we're on.
And think about, we did the wide receivers show on Netflix. We do all these things. These guys are treated like, superstars. I don't know. I've never heard an interview with Nico Collins. I don't know what his personality is. I have no idea if there's any jersey sales. It seems like he's just a big, awesome, reliable receiver who just goes about his business, has no drama, and just like shows up and just mauls guys. I love it. I love he reminds me of Julio watching him a little bit. I know it's a huge compliment, but like his style of play looks like that.
A huge compliment, but not an inaccurate one at all. All right, let's move on to the Sunday night game.
Oof.
Cowboys going up to Pittsburgh. Dak Prescott's first trip to Pittsburgh since that incredible game when he was a rookie,
Oh yeah.
where he and Zeke went up against Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger. As long as I'm giving you quirky stats, couple that I really love, and like I'm not trying to rub salt in the wounds of Bears fans. I'm really not. Like I'm not out on Caleb, but
Yeah.
I do think it's very fun. First of all, Justin Fields just had his first 300-yard passing game as a Steeler. He only did that once in 3 years with Chicago.
Okay.
And I also think it's very interesting that all four of Justin Fields' Pittsburgh games are among his 16 best passer ratings as an NFL player. Like
Wow.
all
Already.
all four of his Steeler games are among the best games he's played in his career. I don't know if you want to credit that to the stability in Pittsburgh, Arthur Smith, Fields' own maturity, whatever you want to attribute it to, but the consistency clearly looks like it's there for Justin Fields.
Yeah, but last week he had a bad fumble. And
He
like
did.
that
He
that's like
did.
that's the bad Justin Fields that comes up, that the stats look great and we love him as a kid and we love him as a leader. But it's like in crunch time, you're playing a team you should beat, the Indianapolis Colts, and he had a bad fumble and that helped lead to a Colts victory. I'm fascinated for this one because here come the Cowboys, and as much as that was a deep exhale after beating the Giants, like I don't think they played particularly well in that game either.
Did that game not play out exactly the way we thought it would,
You
where
and I said that on the podcast last week. We said
just
that.
the
Like
most uninspiring win ever?
I said it and I said it insulting. And I heard from one of the Amazon people who listened to this when I was like, that's not a game that belongs on Amazon on a Thursday night. That's a game that used to be Sunday Night Football or Fox with, Joe
Oops.
and Troy or Burkhardt and Brady now. Like that game belonged on Thursday Night Football. If that's a short week, both teams looked a little haggard, and the Cowboys defense with a bunch of corners down found a way to eke one out, but that offense did not look like it was humming. And the one play to CeeDee Lamb and a couple of big runs, but like I guess the positive for the Cowboys is their defense stepped up and they were able to stop Devin Singletary and the Giants' running attack. But I don't feel much better about the Cowboys as I did a week ago. That win there was a survive and advance win. It wasn't by any means a statement. And then you lose all these players to injury. And I don't know. Let's see how the defense looks without Parsons.
That's what I was gonna. I mean, even if you're a Cowboy fan that felt good about that, you lose Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. It sounds like Micah's at least gonna be out this week, at least, if not a little bit more. And then Lawrence is on injured reserve, so that's 4+ games. I mean, I know sometimes we can overreact to injuries. This is still the NFL. You give coaches a week, a couple weeks, they can come up with a good game plan. But this is already the worst defense in the league against the run. And when you can't defend the run, it doesn't matter how good your pass
No
rushers are.
doubt.
So I did like, and you just mentioned it. Everything looks so difficult for the Cowboys
So
offense,
hard.
Peter.
So
Like
hard. And
every
what's his
completion
name?
is a tight window throw.
Hunter Lupke. What was his
Hunter
name?
Lipke, yeah, undrafted fullback.
On big opportunity, like two big plays in this game, and that's the playmaker they're going to. And kudos to Mike McCarthy and Shoddy and all the guys to unleash that. But like that's not ideal. It's not ideal that we're relying on that guy.
It's just everything feels difficult for the Cowboys. I have to imagine, and maybe not against Pittsburgh. The Steelers don't even want to play that way. Like they're gonna slow this game
Yeah.
down and try to possess the ball, but it does feel like you're gonna need to score points to stay alive without DeMarcus and definitely without Micah Parsons. I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but you got the Lions and the Niners are on the horizon for the Cowboys, by the way. So maybe what we should be saying is like they need to find a way to win this game just so that, they're treading water at 500 instead of falling too far below.
Oh, and by the way, the Commanders look like they're a pretty good team, and they're not going away either. So, yeah, I don't want to be doom and gloom after a win, but it's hard for me to go nuts. And then what happened to Trevon Diggs? He got dehydrated, but he's fine. Like that was like alarming too. And he comes off
Yeah,
the field.
it
You're like,
was
wait, we
it
need
was
you.
cramps and Micah Parsons' best teammate ever trying to like rub the cramps out right there on the. I was like, Micah, you don't 100% know what the issue is. I don't
Please
know if that's a good
let a
idea.
trainer do that. Let the trainer or the doctor with the hat on the sidelines. I'm sure you know his name. I don't know what's that doctor's name
Oh God, Dr.
the
Cooper
cowboy
with his Stetson, yeah,
the
Dr.
cowboy
Cooper
hat
with his
on.
Stetson cowboy hat.
Perfect. So fitting. Great.
We'll see where it goes, but that is everything we just laid out is why I can't rule out the possibility of the Cowboys doing something with like
Yeah.
with a trade. And I
Hunter
don't know if
Lupke
it's
is why. Yes.
yeah, I don't know if it's Davante Adams, but we've seen this before where, the Cowboys were a game under 500 halfway through the season when they
Let me ask
decided to
you.
go get Amari Cooper.
I was gonna say Amari. So like, how'd that end? Did that end ugly with Amari, or did it just like kind of fizzle out? And Jerry was like, "I'm gonna get a fifth round pick for him instead." Because would he come back?
I'd be shocked.
Okay.
It ended ugly. Like
Okay.
the Cowboys were frustrated with Amari by the time they traded him. I think there's no way that you accept a fifth round pick
That
for a
was
receiver of Amari's caliber if you're not just trying to get it done
that
because you're
was
frustrated.
that was the same offseason that AJ Brown got a first round pick for him, and Amari went for a fifth round pick. And I'm like, wow, okay, interesting.
That's I've seen people in Dallas circles talk about um maybe we could reunite with Amari, and I'm just like I'd be very surprised. Like
Yeah.
I don't see it there. We'll see what happens with the Cowboys, but should be a very, if anything, I'm just looking forward to the scenes like Cowboys Steelers. We don't get to see it that often. Actually,
No,
last
it's
time,
cool.
I
It's
think,
it's those logos, and it's
yeah,
you think all the Super Bowls and even the one in the '90s, like it still means something to a lot of fans seeing those two logos play each other.
last time it happened was right after Dak's injury in 2022. So not quite
Who was
what
the
you signed
quarterback?
up
Was
for.
it Cooper Rush?
That was Garrett Gilbert.
Who won?
Almost beat the Steelers. The
Steelers
Steelers did
won.
wind up winning. I
Yeah.
want to say Minka Fitzpatrick picked Garrett Gilbert off in a crucial drive. Why do I remember this stuff?
No, that's good. Where's Minka now? Is he still there in Pittsburgh? Is he still
Minka's still
playing?
with Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
heard his name at all this season. I just thought,
Not,
okay,
yeah.
it's time.
Sunday
There you
night,
go.
still plenty of time to change
Is
that.
this
All right,
not a
let's,
TV show where we just name names and we just like, what happened to Garrett Gilbert?
dude, anytime you want to do that, that's what we do when we're not recording this show.
I
We just
know
sit
that's what
around
it should be.
reliving like mid 2000s football players.
Perfect.
Last game I want to talk to you about, that is the Saints at the Chiefs Monday night. We're knocking out the big primetime games this weekend. All right, we just kind of talked about this, and it's the theme of our hit this week, but what are the Chiefs going to do at receiver? And as
Yeah.
we're recording this, I haven't heard like a definitive update on Rashee Rice either.
Yeah. Okay. So I was there Sunday. I went to Chiefs Chargers, and I'm obviously very tied in with the Chiefs. I've been covering them for years, and I've got a great relationship with Brett Veach, the GM, and Spags and Reed and whatever. When Rice went down, I was getting texts, not from Chiefs people, but like that's season ending. That's done. Like that injury, you see it, you know it. It's pretty textbook. That's a torn ACL. It's done. And now there's this like hint of optimism that we can get him back. And then there's also a hint of optimism that we can get Hollywood Brown back. And there's this hint of optimism that we're going to get Pacheco back earlier than expected. So then all of a sudden, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're like, okay, if we could just hang around, try to just get by. We don't need to trade the future. We don't need to make some drastic decision. But I know Brett Veach really well, and you better believe that this guy is going to be doing some sort of horse trading over the next few weeks and trying to get someone in, because that game on Sunday, Carson Steele drops the ball, fumbles. Sky Moore drops a pass. Kelsey, they tried forcing the ball. He had a bunch of stats, but like you could tell it's not what it used to be. You go right down the list. It's asking a lot for Xavier Worthy to be the number one wide receiver on a Super Bowl contending team. And Worthy's been amazing. Been one of the best rookies in football, but he's not catching 9 balls for 96 yards. He's one long ball and a couple other cool plays to seal the game. So to me, you go down that list. Maury Cooper makes sense. I mentioned both Giants guys, Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt. I mentioned Cooper Kupp on Collins' show on Monday, and that made a lot of news in Ram circles and Chief circles. It's not from any information. I should be clarifying in that and just saying, you look at that type of team where, okay, this is at the October, October 1st point of the season. We're 1-3. We've got all these injuries. Do we now cut bait on a Cooper Kupp? Do we now cut bait on an Amari Cooper? Do we now cut bait on a, Davante's not going there, but like this is the point in the season where it's, we could still get a first or second round draft pick because those guys can get a full season's worth of these guys. So a lot of names will be tossed around, but holy crap, Dave, their defense is so good.
Yeah.
And Chris Jones is so good that they can win games with what they have now. It's just not going to be easy, and it puts a lot of pressure on Pat.
I mean, sometimes I feel like the Chiefs are doing a bit where they're just like, how hard can we try to get people off the bandwagon?
Yeah.
Like how many people can we convince we're not going to, and it ain't going to be me, Peter.
Well,
It
no,
is
me
not,
neither. And
it's not going to be me.
And I didn't bail last year on them when they were a wild card team and had to beat the Dolphins on a Saturday night game on Peacock and then go on the road twice before the Super Bowl because there's just too much institutional knowledge, too much experience, and quietly their defense might be the best in football, and that still matters.
I want to see. I think they need to get a guy. Just because, like,
it'd be fun. It's a different story. It's like,
sure.
We're going for this three-peat. All right, the same war horses are coming out here. We were supposed to have Hollywood Brown and Worthy and all this speed, and there's injuries across the board. So now we had to go, and here's the guy who saved the season. It's a fun story.
I watched with my own eyes Amari Cooper turn the Dallas Cowboys into a playoff team. That's all I'm saying. Like he can show up in the middle of the season and give your passing game a spark. I have seen it from experience.
What team? Back to Davante before we go. What team would be the biggest surprise? Like to me, if Detroit was like, let's just bring in Davante Adams. Like I'm trying to think of a team.
I would love that with my whole heart.
I think they could use him like as much as they exploded on Monday night. Like Davante Adams to Detroit would be really cool. I'm trying to think of a team that no one's talking about because Schefter tweets and everyone thinks it's the letter of the law, and he's right that there's connections with Saints and obviously Jets, and that's going to be the leaders, right? There's always a third team. Yeah. And I'm just wondering who that third team is going to be. And that's the fun part of this.
There's so much, like there's just so much content being made. Like, I don't know if I could find a team that literally nobody is talking about.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, I don't think they fit in the same parameters, but I said yesterday, like, if Pittsburgh was willing to do the Ayuk deal, why wouldn't they want to call about Davante Adams?
I like that. I actually like that.
It makes sense to me. I don't know. We'll see.
So Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and New England all put their chips on the table for Ayuk, and none of them completed the deal. So if you think about those three teams, New England's not going to do anything. That doesn't make sense at this point. Cleveland, I don't think makes sense at this point. And it leaves Pittsburgh. Interesting.
Could help Justin Fields.
Might want to clip this one off.
Put this one out there for when. Actually, we've talked about enough teams. Like whoever it is, clip out the part where we talk about
smart.
them.
Yes.
I do real quick before we like the other side of this matchup. I'm so intrigued to see. And like the Saints have already made plenty of a statement. They beat the hell out of Dallas. Like I think of the Saints as a really good team, but what an opportunity for them to it would be among the statement wins of the season. I knew Alvin Kamara was off to an amazing start. Did you realize he's already 50% of the way to his 2023 yardage totals?
I did not notice that. And he's just been fantastic. And they shouldn't have won, but they had opportunities to win last week. Let's just say that.
Yeah, for sure. So
Saints, Super Bowl's in New Orleans. If ever there was a time, let's go Saints.
Speaking of scenes, that would be incredible. Looking forward to another great week, Peter. As always, we appreciate it. And the beauty of these trade situations is we'll be able to check in next week with whether we were right, wrong, or still waiting. I guess
real quick, just for you to know just how much the NFL is king. The Mets and the Yankees are both in the playoffs. The Knicks just traded a massive deal to get Karl Anthony Towns. I put on local radio yesterday afternoon as the Mets were coming back against the Brewers. And all anyone's talking about is Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh. So just so you know, that's just how it goes.
It's the national pastime. I know that it wasn't always the case, but it sure is now. Peter Schrager, always love talking to you, man. I'll catch up with you soon.
You're the man, dude. Thank you.
Our next preview is a game that's got a little bit of a different narrative since we started the season. You look at the schedule in August and you think Ravens at Bengals, two teams fighting for control of the AFC North, fighting for a top spot in the conference. And here in week 5, instead, you get the Ravens seeking to go above 500 and the Cincinnati Bengals fighting to literally keep their season alive at 1-3 It's Ravens at Bengals, and it is our on the road segment presented by Honda. Dreams are unstoppable. I hate to break it to you, though. Road teams have been fairly stoppable here over the first month of the season. The teams we've featured in on the road so far this year are just 1-3 on the season. We will see if the Ravens can subvert that. They are 2.5-point road favorites, so I think that's worth taking into account. Based on the way things have been trending, I'll step out on a limb and say I expect the Baltimore Ravens to handle business. And it's for the boring fundamental reasons of football, because I get it. It's fun to focus on the quarterback matchup in a game like this. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, two of the biggest stars in the league. You love it when you have star power like this. Joe Burrow finally trying to get one over on the Ravens. He won one of his first big starts against them way back in 2021. It's been all Ravens in this rivalry since then. And on top of that, it was Baltimore that he injured his wrist again last year and was out for the rest of the year. Joe Burrow seems to be hitting his stride. Struggled badly week 1 to the point where people wondered if he was fully healthy, if he was fully comfortable. And since that loss to New England, it's 3 straight 100-plus passer ratings, 7 touchdowns, just 1 interception. Bengals offense looking like the unit we remember it being. But as much fun as it might be to compare the quarterbacks, I think it really comes down to what this abysmal, for lack of a better word, Cincinnati defense can do against the Ravens run game. And I'm not very encouraged. Cincinnati's allowed 150 rush yards in 3 of 4 games. They have allowed 100 rush yards in all 4. And mind you, their best performance against the run this season was that Monday night game in week 3, where they literally only allowed 2 incompletions against Jaden Daniels. Ball hit the ground twice. So forgive me if I'm not impressed that you were slightly better against the run. Pick a rushing metric. And I'm here to tell you that the Bengals aren't looking pretty. 31st in the league in rushing yards over expected, aka how well a run does relative to what the blocking says it should do. 27th in rushing EPA. 38 rushing first downs allowed so far this season. That's the 4th highest number in the NFL. I love this one. The Bengals have only stuffed the ball carrier at or behind the line of scrimmage on 13% of rushing attempts against them. That's 5th worst in the league. They've surrendered 189 rushing yards before a defender was able to attempt a tackle, let alone make one. Bottom 10 in the NFL. They're bad. They are bad against the run. And what do the Baltimore Ravens do? They run the damn ball. They've outrun their opponent by 100 yards in all 4 games. They've gone over 250 against the Cowboys and most recently against the Buffalo Bills. This is what they do. And I worry if the Ravens get out to any sort of lead, it's going to be curtains for Cincinnati by sheer virtue of the fact that Cincinnati won't be able to get off the field. I thought Joe Burrow put it perfectly in his media availability on Wednesday. He said, I'm going to have to play damn near perfect. And he's right. They're not only going to have to find a way to get out in front early, but stay up. I just don't think they're equipped to play from behind. You've got to put the Ravens in a deficit, make them pass their way out of it, because that's just not what they've had to do in most of these games. Wonderful stat that I just found right before we got on the air. Isaiah Likely is Baltimore's leading receiver with 167 yards, and 111 of those came when he blew up against the Chiefs in the season opener. They just haven't had to do a lot of it. You're seeing Lamar Jackson pass 18 times a game because the combination of him, Derrick Henry, and Justice Hill has been that hard to deal with. I'm here to tell you, the Bengals are a hell of a lot of fun on offense. I imagine Joe Burrow is going to find a way to make some big plays against them. Shout out to my guy, Amarius Mims. Got his first start at right tackle in week 4 against Carolina. Rookie debut, allowed 1 pressure to Jadeveon Clowney in 32 dropbacks. I like the Bengals line. I like their running backs. Of course, I like Joe Burrow in the passing game. I think the Bengals will be able to get some points. Will it matter if they aren't able to jump out to an early lead? I got to see it to believe it. It's been that bad for Cincinnati's defense. big situation for Lou Anarumo, Bengals defensive coordinator, and those guys on that side of the ball, because it's not going to get harder than stopping the Ravens running game. And guess what? 1-4 probably sinks you. I guess we can't rule out Joey B completely, but it probably sinks your season to fall to 1-4, division loss to the Ravens on top of that. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I don't love it. I feel good about the Ravens in a road spot. We'll see how they do. Looking forward to this AFC North grudge match. Two of the biggest games of week 5 are actually both happening right out here on the West Coast. Let's get to the big one in the late window on Fox. Tom Brady will have the call as the Arizona Cardinals go up to Santa Clara to face the 49ers. As per usual, when I'm talking Niners, I got to bring in my guy, Eric Williams. And Eric, I'm gonna start this and let you have a little bit of a victory lap, my guy, because and this isn't, it's not a new story, but I just think we need to talk about Brock Purdy. That's what I'm trying to say. And we need to point out, like, it's funny. Everybody, myself included, was so quick to wonder what this guy would be capable of doing with a lessened supporting cast. He's not just playing well. He's balling for the San Francisco 49ers right now. And obviously we know who they don't have. We know that the lineup has had to shuffle. Brock Purdy, pick the metric you want to use. Like, he's top 5 in success rate. He's top 3 in EPA per drop back. He's 3rd in big time throws, according to PFF. He's averaging 2nd or 3rd most yards per attempt. Like, Brock Purdy is the best thing going for the San Francisco 49ers right now. And I think we need to talk about it.
Yeah, no doubt. It's pretty cool to see. Thank you for the props. I appreciate that. I will take that. I was able to talk to Matt Hasselbeck about Brock Purdy going into this week 4 story I'm working on. And he talked about the game manager moniker. Like Brock Purdy, Matt Hasselbeck was a late round pick who kind of had to earn his way up the depth chart, and eventually was traded to Seattle Seahawks, where he was finally able to start. He used the label game controller instead of game manager. And he said basically Brady's the GOAT of game controllers, basically, that he has control of the game. And I think you're seeing Purdy in that role now because he knows that offense and has command of that offense inside and out. And so now he's just really comfortable. He's playing with a lot of confidence. And I think we talked about this a little bit last year. There was a lot of turnover-worthy plays that he seemed to get away with and was very fortunate. And I think this year we're seeing less of that. We're seeing him be willing to just throw the ball away and punt. And in the red zone, maybe he'll throw the ball out of the end zone. And so I think that shows, again, that he knows he's the guy. He doesn't have to prove it on every single play, and that he can just go out there and play efficient football.
Pro Football Focus actually charts that. It's one of my favorite things. They chart turnover-worthy plays, decisions that lead to turnovers, interceptions, fumbles, whatever. Even if there's not a turnover, PFF will chart whether the decision was a good one. They've got Brock Purdy at 4 on the year. That's 2.6%. So yeah, in addition to just playing at a high level, he certainly seems to be cutting out those mistakes. And when he is maybe ripping a risky throw, it's working out for him. The other thing that's incredible, Eric, we talk so much about Kyle Shanahan's scheme and the open receivers and the yards and yards of open space that these guys have. According to Next Gen Stats, the 49ers are tied for the highest number of tight window throws in the NFL, and they are also tied for the lowest number of yards of separation per target. So not only is Brock Purdy throwing into a bunch of tight windows, his receivers also aren't giving him that much space to work with. Not only is it impressive, but I am curious. I mean, Brandon Ayuk is still here. Debo's played several games this year. I know he missed one, but he's been available. George Kittle is the same. Even without Christian McCaffrey, I'm kind of surprised to hear that Brock Purdy is having to throw into so many tight windows. Why do you think that is?
A couple different reasons. I think he trusts everybody on the roster, not just the mainline guys. And I think you're seeing that with Juwan Jennings and the kind of rapport that they have. He's really given Juwan a lot of opportunities to make plays, and he's come up with a lot of them. I mean, he was a beast against the the Rams up here when I got a chance to watch. He scored 3 touchdowns. Just seemed like he caught everything. And then I think the other thing for Brock is a lot of people talk about his arm strength, but I think what they don't give him credit for is his ability to layer throws into tight windows, over linebackers and in front of safeties, on the outside. If you're throwing a hole shot against cover 2, he's great at kind of just fitting the ball in there and anticipating where that receiver is going to be. I think we talk about see-it throwers and guys that are waiting for somebody to get open and then throwing it as hard as they can to kind of fit it into that window. Brock plays with such great anticipation and trust in that he can put the ball where he needs to put it. He's able to make plays that way. And like we just talked about, he's able also to avoid those turnovers.
49ers defense had a, fantastic get right game against New England. All due respect to them, I think that's maybe a little bit more about what New England doesn't have than what the 49ers might be doing on defense. I think the Arizona Cardinals are a wonderful litmus test here because this is a game the 49ers should win. They're favored by 7.5, 8 points at home. But we've already seen this season, this Cardinals offense can absolutely make life difficult on you. This is a team that loves to run the ball, even for the amount of time that they've spent trailing. They're a top 10 team in just the amount of times that they hand the ball off to James Conner and their other backs. Where do you see the Cardinals possibly at least presenting a challenge for this 49ers defense, which I don't think they've been terrible. I also don't think they've been the fire-breathing unit we've gotten used to seeing over the last few years.
Yeah, what's that narrow path to victory for the Cardinals? I think it would have to include James Conner running the football. They seem like they're better when they're balanced and they can kind of get him going and then get the play action game going off of that. Certainly, Marvin Harrison Jr. has had some success this season, and he needs to be a focal point of their offense. I think the problem with the Cardinals is he's been really good early, and then he struggled late in games. I think he has 9 catches for 177 yards, 4 touchdowns in the first quarter. The rest of the 3 quarters, he has 6 catches for 66 yards. So they haven't been able to get him going after the first quarter, and I think that's going to have to change against the Niners. And I think there's some possibilities for them to make some big plays in the secondary if they can protect Murray up and get down the field. Again, whether it's Marvin Harrison or Michael Wilson or Trey McBride, who they're expecting to get back, missed last week's game with a concussion. But it's going to be up to the offensive line being able to hold up. I think Kelvin Benjamin's been struggling a little bit at right tackle. And we obviously know that the Niners can get after the quarterback with Joey Bosa and the rest of those guys. And so going to have to block up so Murray can push the ball down the field. And then you're going to have to give them a steady dose of James Conner and run the football. And they've been effective running the football against them over the last couple of years in terms of the Cardinals running the football on the Niners.
That is, for all of their warts, that is something the Cardinals are typically pretty good at. I'm curious to see if they can do it. I'm grading Arizona on a bit of a curve, but it'll be progress if they can even hang, because they've lost 4 in a row to San Francisco, and those 4 have not come within 16, 20 points. It's been brutal here over the last couple seasons. So even a competitive game would be a step in the right direction for Jonathan Gannon. Let's take it down here to LA for the other big West Coast game. Eric, were you aware before this week the Green Bay Packers have played the LA Rams 4 seasons in a row, and this is the first time they will ever play at SoFi Stadium? I know, weird scheduling quirks like this happen all the time, but I was a little bit surprised to hear that. I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of green and gold in the stands on Sunday afternoon.
I suspect there's going to be a lot of cheeseheads there at SoFi Stadium. Like there was a lot of red when they played the Niners a couple weeks ago. I was aware that they've played over the last 4 games, and I believe the Packers are 4-0 in those games. I wasn't aware that they haven't played at SoFi, so that's interesting. Matt LaFleur, who's obviously good friends with Sean McVay, coached with him in Washington, is 4-0 against McVay. His brother, Mike LaFleur, is serving as the offensive coordinator. I think the one thing that sticks out for me when I look at this game and I think about the Rams, who are 1-3 right now and struggling a little bit, dealing with a lot of injuries, defensively, they're struggling without Aaron Donald. They're last or second to last in a lot of the defensive metrics when you go and look at them, struggling to get pass rush going. They have 7 sacks on the year, although their pressure rate is tops in the league right now. So I think they're missing Aaron Donald. I also think they're missing Ernest Jones, who they moved in a trade to the Tennessee Titans because they don't value that position as much as maybe others in the league. So I'm interested to see if they're going to be able to get after Jordan Love, who had 3 picks last week and lost to the Vikings. They only have 1 interception, the Rams do, this season, so I don't know if they're going to be able to take advantage of that. They're hopeful to get Darius Williams back this week at cornerback. They started his 21-day window. That would be a huge help for their secondary in terms of adding experience and a playmaker back there. But right now, the defense is not holding up their end of the bargain with Aaron Donald not being there.
I looked this up. I said this on last week's show too. The Rams were dead last in defensive DVOA heading into the game against the Bears. They had a nice day overall. They held the Bears to 260 yards of offense. They only allowed 24 points. They only moved up 1 spot to 31 overall. So clearly still not quite finding the secret sauce. Although I love what you just said. I know this doesn't help you get Jordan Love on the ground on Sunday. I do want to point out Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, their first 2 draft picks, the 2 defensive linemen out of Florida State, looking like very promising players. They are top 2. They're the top 2 rookies in the league in pressures, and they're both top 25 across the entire league in pressures. So that's a very positive sign. But like you said, when you lose Aaron Donald, maybe that's cold comfort when you have to figure out how to slow down an offense like this.
Yeah, I think bottom line is it's going to take time for those rookies to kind of figure it out and start finishing those plays. And then you have to remember that Chris Shula, this is the first time that he's serving as a defensive coordinator. So he's trying to figure out not only 11 guys that play well together, but what's his game day situation and tendencies and play calling and all that stuff, on the run in terms of this being his first gig as a defense coordinator.
Stat to know for my Packer fans for this game. It stands to reason, right? When you play with a backup quarterback, you're probably not going to be as explosive on offense. Jaden Reed was averaging 30 yards per outing with Malik Willis in the lineup. Dontavian Wicks, 26 yards total in those 2 games with Malik Willis. Now in 2 games with Jordan Love, Jaden Reed averaging 140 yards, or no, I'm sorry. 140 yards per outing in those 2 games. And Dontavian Wicks also averaging 40 yards per game with 2 touchdowns. So I'm guessing it's going to be a lot more explosive against this Rams defense from the Packers.
Yeah, I'm sure the Green Bay receivers are happy to have Jordan Love back, but is Josh Jacobs happy to have Jordan Love back? Because he certainly was getting a lot more touches when Jordan Love was injured and they were just running the football. So I think you kind of, like you said, maybe have to find some balance between that explosive passing game and being able to run the football.
Between what Love's doing with these receivers and what Matthew Stafford has been up to, I don't want to undersell that. I know the Rams are 1-3, but Matthew Stafford has been must-watch TV all season. This feels like a must-watch game. Can't wait to see how it plays out. Eric, 2 big games out here on the West Coast. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. The last of our big game previews for week 5 is actually tonight's game. Thursday Night Football features an NFC South rivalry. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up to Atlanta to face the Falcons. Early chance for the Bucs to kind of grab control of the division. Off to a hot start. We'll see if they can keep it going on the road. And to talk about it, who else would we want to chat with but our buddy Greg Auman? Greg, are we recovered from the temperatures in Tampa from this most recent win? Because it looked brutal on TV. I'm not used to that type of climate anymore. I don't think I can do it anymore.
I was in an air-conditioned press box, so I can't begin to complain. But I talked to Aaron Andrews to see Brady down. Brady was on the field in a dress shirt for probably 40 minutes before the game, and it's not the kind of temperature you can wear that out there in direct sun for. So yeah, the players were on IVs and everything else. It was I think the feels like temperature was 105. So I enjoyed the press box very much.
Yeah, if you're on the Gulf Coast between the months of May and October, it's like a 2 or 3 shower sort of situation on days like that. Just
Right. Yeah. Mayfield made a point to tell Aaron that he changed pants at halftime.
I get it. I absolutely get it. All right, well, it'll be air conditioned in Atlanta tonight as the Bucs go up to
Right.
face the Falcons. I will say, like, okay, so the climate's going to be better. This feels like a really unfortunate week for the Bucs to have to play on a short week. I know, like, it's tough for everybody when you're playing on a short week, but not only are the Buccaneers banged up, it seems like a few of those injuries are ones they wouldn't be dealing with if they got to play on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, Todd Bowles said that today. I mean, I think he said a couple. They have basically 6 people out. They put a guy on IR yesterday and have 5 people they ruled out, and there's probably at least 2 that if they had 3 more days to heal, might be in play to go. So you can't pick when you have a short week, but this especially. I mean, the guys that are healthy, all they've had are walkthrough practices. A road Thursday is the least prep you can have for an NFL turnaround. So they'll be hurting, but if they can get through it, then you get the opposite. And the next game, they'll have 11 days. They get the Saints, who have a Monday night road game. So in theory, they've got 4 extra prep days on New Orleans next week. They're hurting right now.
I am intrigued because it's been a theme for Tampa really since week 1. I mean, they haven't had Antoine Winfield Jr. for a minute at this point. They did just get Vita Vea back, but Kalijah Cansey is still out with a calf injury. It doesn't seem like it's overly affected the Tampa Bay defense, though. I mean, I know the Lions racked up a ton of yards in week 2, but they were still able to hold them to just 16 points. They've been very effective defensively for the vast majority of the season, even with the injuries. What do you think has been the key to that? Like, what are they drawing on to keep performing so well despite those losses?
Yeah, I think it's just solid depth where they've needed it. I mean, to lose Winfield for 4 games now. Christian Isian is a guy that was an undrafted rookie nickel last year. He stepped in really well at safety and kind of held the fort down there. On the defensive line, I mean, to be down Vea and Cansey, that's their 2 best D linemen. So to be able to stop the run without those 2, a lot of unsung heroes, guys like Greg Gaines and Will Golston and Logan Hall. They've had practice squad call-ups that have played 20, 30 snaps. And now receiver Sterling Shepard's a guy who, was on the practice squad, got elevated and ended up playing 50 snaps Sunday against the Eagles, had a big catch, had almost as many yards Sunday as he did all of last season with the Giants. So I think their depth has been in the right places, and it stepped up and helped them where they needed it.
One thing that really jumped out to me about that game against Philadelphia was the way the Buccaneers essentially used the quick, short passing game as a substitute for trying to run the ball. It felt very obvious they wanted to get the ball out of Baker Mayfield's hands and not try to test the teeth of that Eagles defensive front. Is that something we see them trying to maintain going forward? Is that like a 1-week game plan sort of situation? And especially I know we're harping on injuries, but looks like 2 Buccaneers receivers are going to miss this game at least. Where do you see that going from here? How do you see the Bucs sort of maintaining that momentum off of a very pass happy game plan against Philly?
Yeah, Baker Mayfield had 33 passes in the first half against the Eagles. It's like, even when they were up, they weren't necessarily running to salt the game away. They will be down 2 receivers on Thursday night. They'll have Jalen McMillan has a hamstring. He's out. Trey Palmer has a concussion. So that would be their 3 and 4. So Sterling Shepard, who would be on the practice squad, is now their receiver 3. They have a rookie named Cam Johnson, who'll be number 4. I think they'll probably have another practice squad call up as their 5th receiver. Obviously, it kind of starts and ends with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Chris has had some great games in Atlanta up there. That's who they'll lean on the most. But a lot of passes out of the backfield, as you said. They definitely liked throwing the ball to Bucky Irving and Rashad White. Had a couple quick throws that were almost like laterals that end up counting as a run, even though they were kind of tosses from Mayfield. They did a good job of getting rid of the ball quickly. I don't think the Falcons have the same pass rush up front that the Eagles have, but they're still going to be down a tackle where, again, it probably suits them to get rid of the ball quick on Thursday.
While I was prepping for this, we got the word, I guess, as bad as it might look for Tampa on the injury report, we did see Bijan Robinson is off the report for Atlanta. It looks like he's going to be available. Having said that, it doesn't feel like the Falcons have been able to get the run game going to the degree that you would guess. I mean, You assume they've got the offensive line for it. They've obviously got a great tandem of running backs. It just hasn't really come together. This feels like the matchup to try it, though. I like if I'm looking for weaknesses with the Bucs, they haven't been particularly strong against the run. Might this be the week that we get a big time Bijan Robinson game?
I think they'll definitely go for it. I mean, their line is hurting too. I mean, they don't have Drew Dahlman, their center. They're just getting Caleb McGarry, their right tackle, back from injury. He'll go, but he probably won't be 100%. But yeah, I would think home crowd, you want to get that run game going. It's a two-pronged thing. And like you said, that they haven't necessarily clicked yet. They've had 4 very tight games. I think barely beat the Saints, barely beat the Eagles, barely lost to the Chiefs in a close game there. So all 4 of their games, even the opener against Pittsburgh, was a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, and it just didn't work out for them. So they've kind of been the opposite of the Bucs. Bucs have had 2 17-point wins, weren't really close in their loss to the Broncos. So I'm curious to see whether this is another close one or whether it gets away the way some of the Bucs games have so far.
I was talking about that earlier this week, and I get it's the NFL. Everybody's done this. I don't think like experience is the end all be all, but I mean, the Falcons have played this entire season in the fire, like even the losses have come down to the final possession, as have the wins. Do you think even in the NFL that gives, that adds a benefit where you get used to performing in those high pressure situations? I mean, the game winning drive against the Saints, not necessarily the most impressive thing we've seen all year, but the end of that Philly game was about as well as anybody's done 2-minute end of game situations so far this season. I mean, I have to assume that stuff pays off as you go through a season.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that they kind of stun the Eagles that way. I mean, it's one of those where you hang around, and then with the game on the line, Kirk Cousins stepped up and made plays. I mean, like you said, against the Saints, 30 yards of it was on a DPI penalty, so it wasn't like an amazing catch, but it still got Koo in range. I mean, Koo is a great weapon. You get to the 40, he's good for you. So I think as much as the Chiefs game was about them not being able to get done and make plays at the end, like you said, they've been there before. The frustrations of third down struggles and red zone struggles are there for them, but it's the fact that they've been in these close games and have pulled out 2 wins has to give them some confidence if they're back in that situation against the Bucs.
I'm really hoping at the Bear, and he hasn't been bad by any stretch, I don't think, since the first game. We made a lot about how much Kirk Cousins was playing under shotgun. Could he move around enough to do the job? I think he's been much better in the next 3 games, but I'm really hoping this is the game where it just looks more consistent, because that's my big thing with the Falcons so far is it's mainly just been about moments for them. It just doesn't seem like Kirk and the offense in general have been able to play a consistent 4 quarters of good, efficient offense.
Right. I mean, you think about like the Bucs. I mean, the Bucs came out, scored on their first 2 touchdowns, the first 2 drives against the Eagles. Had a 24-0 lead there. The Falcons have spent their entire season within a score of the other team. I mean, it's a perilous existence when you're always playing in close games. But to that, like you said, that should help them. If this comes up again, they've spent more time in those tight situations than the Bucs have. They just haven't had a half or that much where you've had sustained success you can build on. They've had enough plays when they've needed to pull out 2 wins.
Both of these games last year were bangers. They came down to the wire, very entertaining games. I'm hoping for the same for this one. I know Thursday night football can be a little bit sloppy, but I'm really hoping for the best with this one. It's got some huge potential. Greg, we'll be sure to check in with you afterward, man. But as always, I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, Dave.
Up next, it's time for the Super 6, and it's sponsored by DraftKings. If you're not familiar, please head on over to foxsports.com, Fox Sports app. It's the Super 6. Every week, you pick between 6 different bets, prop bets, over-unders, game scores, etc. You get the 6 right, you can win big prizes. It's a ton of fun. Makes keeping up with all the action on a Sunday that much more entertaining when you've got a little bit of different action on the different games. I'm going to do my best to help you out with one that I think feels easy. It's famous last words, but one of the props this week is who will have the most passing yards: Brock Purdy, CJ Stroud, Matthew Stafford, Jaden Daniels. We do this every week. I've gotten cute a few times. It's what I do. I'm not going to overthink it here in week 5. I'm just going to go with Brock Purdy, who it's a safe bet will be among the league's passing leaders because that's just what he is. He's second in passing yards this season. More important than that, he's second in yards per attempt. Even more important than that, he's first in air yards per attempt. So at 10.7 air yards per attempt, that basically means every time Brock Purdy throws the ball, it's averaging 11 yards downfield. Like, he's not hitting screens that are going for long gains. He's not stringing together intermediate passes. My dude's just airing the ball out. He's absolutely fearless at it. He's been good at it all season, flirting with 300 in 3 of his 4 games and going over in 1 of them. He feels like a lock, especially against a so-so Arizona defense. Feels like a lock to flirt with 300 or go above it. Next best quarterback in airing the ball out among this group is CJ Stroud at 7.5 air yards per attempt. So I think Brock Purdy is in a class of his own among these guys when it comes to stretching the field. I think San Francisco is playing an overmatched defense, and I like Brock Purdy to have the most passing yards of these 4 guys. So lock it in. Go find Super 6 on Fox Sports or the Fox Sports app, foxsports.com or the Fox Sports app, and let me know how it goes. That almost does it for our Week 5 preview, but one more thing to get to, one last bit of business, and that's our hurry-up offense. Plenty more games left on the Week 5 schedule. We're going to give you something quick on all of them, get you on with your day, get you into your weekend without taking up too much more of your time. It's a lighter hurry-up offense than we've been used to. Finally got some bye weeks on the schedule, so I'm optimistic this is going to be a lighter lift. Hopefully I can get in under the buzzer. If you don't know how it goes, my awesome producers are about to put 2 minutes on the clock. I'm going to go through the rest of the Week 5 slate, give you something interesting, give you a nugget to know as we head in to our weekends. So without further ado, let's start it in London. Our first international game of the season is happening in Week 5. It's the Jets versus the Vikings. So make sure you got your alarm set. Make sure you know football starts a little earlier this week. 7 of 8 games played at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium have been decided by 8 points or less. That's where this game is happening. Most games played here have been bangers. I'm guessing this one won't be any different. First time the Vikings have been favored since the season opener. We'll see how they handle that role. Browns at Commanders. I love this stat. Browns punter Corey Bojorquez has punted more times in each of the Browns' 4 games than Commanders punter Tress Way has punted this entire season. I don't know if the Commanders can stay this hot. I don't know if it'll matter against the Browns. Colts at Jags. Only quarterback with a lower completion percentage than Anthony Richardson is Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Something's got to give, right? Dolphins at Patriots, 2 worst scoring offenses in the league, 11 points per game and 13 points per game. I don't really know what else to say there. Panthers at Bears. How's this for a stat? Bears have held their opponents to 21 points or fewer in 10 straight games. It's the longest active streak in the league. We'll see how Caleb and the guys fare. We talked about this earlier this week. Offense needs to improve, but as long as the defense is playing like this, how much does it really matter? Giants at Seahawks. We talked earlier in the show about Nico Collins and his hot start. The number 2 and 3 receivers in the league are playing in this game. Malik Neighbors at 386 yards already. DK Metcalf right behind him at 366. Here's hoping for some aerial fireworks up at Lumen Field. Finishing it off with the Raiders at the Broncos. I would have never guessed this because neither one of these teams has been all that good in recent years. The Raiders have won 8 consecutive games against the Broncos dating back to 2020. So if Bo Nix can get the dub, not just getting Denver over 500, but breaking a losing streak to Las Vegas as well. Boom, there is the buzzer. That is how it is done. We are rounding into mid-season form here on the NFL on Fox podcast. And with that, I wish you a good weekend, a happy Week 5. Look for us in your feeds on Monday. We will be back to cover all of the action, all of the games. We'll be talking to the guys in the booths. We'll be getting all of the best insight, intel from every matchup on Sunday. Looking forward to it as always. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're not, go find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods, wherever you get your NFL news, you can find us there. We will talk to y'all on Monday. I'm already excited for some Week 5 NFL action. Talk to you real soon. Appreciate it.